You're standing over the ball. You've done everything right. You take the club back, you bring it down, and then thud. The turf jumps before the ball does. A fat, ugly divot behind it. The ball limps forward 20 yards while your playing partners go quiet. If that thud lives in your bones, stay with me, because I found out why it almost never happens to ordinary golfers in Japan. Not the pros, the regular people, the retired man on the range in slacks, the office worker after dark. They don't hit behind the ball, and it isn't talent, and it isn't better equipment. It's a single idea that traveled into golf from something 600 years older, and it survived in Japan because Japan protected it. By the end of this, I'm going to hand you a setup drill I traced all the way back to an archery school formalized around the year 1300 in the Kamakura period. It costs you nothing. You can do it tonight, in your living room, in your socks, but you won't understand why it works until the last few minutes. So don't skip. I'll be honest with you, I ignored this for years. I bought the lessons, I bought the gadgets. Then, a few winters back, I was standing on the second level of a driving range in the Setagaya part of Tokyo, freezing, watching a man who had to be 75 hit ball after ball after ball, and not one of them was fat. Clean. Every time. And I stood there thinking, how is that even possible? Let me tell you what I saw, because that's where the thread started. That range in Setagaya was packed on a Tuesday night. Salarymen still in their dress shirts, women in their 60s, kids. Nobody looked like an athlete. And here's the thing that didn't add up for me, the thing I couldn't let go of. In America, on any given range, you hear it constantly. That chunk. That heavy thud where the club digs in behind the ball and the shot dies. It's the most common bad shot in all of amateur golf. Ask any teaching professional and they'll tell you the same thing. Hitting it fat is the #1 thing they fix. But standing there in Tokyo, I barely heard it. I listened for it on purpose. I moved down the line to hear it better. Clean strike after clean strike from people who clearly weren't scratch golfers. Now, I'm a skeptic by nature. My first thought was, it's the mats. Driving range mats are forgiving. You can hit 2 inches behind the ball on a good mat, and it slides right into the back of the ball anyway. Fair point. I told myself that's all it was. Therefore, I went looking for the real test. I went and watched them play on grass, on actual courses outside the city, where a fat shot punishes you the way it punishes all of us. And the pattern held. These weren't long hitters. Half of them couldn't carry the ball 150 yards. But the contact was pure. The ball came off the face first, then the turf, ball, then turf, in that order. Every single time. That order is everything. Let me make this simple, because this one idea is the whole game. When you strike the ball correctly, the lowest point of your swing arc, golfers call it the low point, is not at the ball. It is a few inches ahead of the ball on the target side. You hit the ball on the way down, then the club keeps traveling and brushes the grass after the ball. That's why good players take a divot in front of where the ball was sitting. When you hit it fat, your low point is behind the ball. The club bottoms out early, hits the ground first, and all your speed dumps into the dirt. So the entire mystery came down to one question. How were these ordinary Japanese amateurs getting their low point in front of the ball over and over without thinking about it when Western golfers fight that battle their whole lives and mostly lose? I felt a piece click. It wasn't their swing. Their swings were all different, some short, some long, some ugly. It had to be something before the swing, something in how they stood, something they all shared that nobody was talking about out loud. But when I asked, nobody could quite explain it to me. They'd shrug and say it's just how they were taught. And that gap, that thing everybody did but nobody could name, that's when I realized somebody, somewhere, had made very sure the rest of us never learned it. Here's where I got angry, and I want you to understand why. I went back through my own golf life, 30 years of it. I added up what I'd spent chasing clean contact. Lessons at $40, $50 a pop, a launch monitor, weighted clubs, training aids with straps and rods and alignment sticks, 2 different sets of irons sold to me as more forgiving, somewhere north of $6,000 over the years, and I still stood over the ball afraid of that thud. And it hit me. The entire Western golf teaching machine is not built to fix you, it's built to keep you coming back. Think about it. If the cure for the most common mistake in golf were one free adjustment you could make at home, who would sell you the next lesson? Who would sell you the next club, the next gadget, the next magazine tip that contradicts last month's tip? I'm not saying every instructor is a crook. Most are good people. But the system they work inside profits from your struggle. It sells complexity. It sells the idea that your swing is a broken machine with 40 moving parts, and each part needs its own expensive fix. It breaks you into pieces and charges you to reassemble yourself slowly, so you never quite get there. Japan had every reason to build the same machine. Golf is enormous there. When the game arrived in Japan back in 1901, when an Englishman named Arthur Groom built the first course up on a mountain above Kobe, it was a rich man's import, a Western luxury. It could easily have stayed pure Western, pure complexity, pure dependence. Therefore, the real question got sharper. Why didn't it? Why did ordinary Japanese golf hold on to a simplicity the West threw away? What did they know that protected them? The answer is that the Japanese didn't learn contact from golf at all. They already had it. They had carried it for 600 years in a completely different discipline. And when golf arrived, they simply poured it into the new container without even noticing. The West never had that older knowledge to draw on. So the West filled the empty space with product. I found the older knowledge, and the moment I understood it, my own fat shots nearly disappeared. Let me show you exactly what it is. Everything came down to one word I kept hearing from the older players and the range coaches. Tanden. Tanden is a Japanese word, and it points to a spot on your body. It sits about 3 fingers below your navel and a couple of inches inside, deep in your belly. In English, we might loosely call it your center of gravity, but that's too cold. In Japanese thought, the tanden is your center of balance, your center of power, and your center of calm, all in one place. It is the anchor of the whole body. Now, here's why that matters for the club in your hands. If your true center stays quiet and stable during a movement, everything hanging off that center, your shoulders, your arms, the club swings around a fixed axis, the bottom of the arc lands in the same place every time. But if that center slides backward, away from the target, as most amateurs do on the way down, the whole arc slides back with it. The low point moves behind the ball, and you get the thud. That backward slide has a name among teachers. They call it a reverse weight shift, or hanging back. It is the single biggest cause of the fat shot. And it happens because nobody ever taught us where our center is supposed to live during the swing. The Japanese have taught the tanden for centuries. Not in golf, in everything. In the tea ceremony, in calligraphy, in the martial arts, and most of all in Kyudo, which is Japanese archery. Let me take you to where I traced this, because it stunned me. There is a school of archery and warrior etiquette in Japan called the Ogasawara school. Its traditions were formalized around the year 1300 in the Kamakura period, when Japan was ruled by samurai. This school taught how to shoot a bow from horseback, and how to stand, and how to breathe, and how to hold the body absolutely still while releasing enormous force. Their teachings were written down and passed hand to hand for over 700 years, master to student, almost unbroken. The core of it is a principle I want you to remember. In Kyudo, they speak of the Tatioko Jumanji, the cross of the vertical and the horizontal. The vertical line runs straight down through the crown of your head, through your spine, through the tanden, into the ground. The horizontal line runs across your shoulders and your hips. Where they cross, at the tanden, is your fixed center. The archer builds his whole shot around keeping that cross from collapsing. The vertical stays vertical, the center does not sway. The power comes up out of the ground, through the still center, and out through the arms. I read that description, and I sat back in my chair, because that is a flawless description of a good golf setup and a good golf strike. A steady head, a vertical spine that doesn't sway off the ball. Power delivered from the ground up through a quiet center. The archer and the golfer are solving the exact same problem, how to deliver force without the center wandering. The link isn't my imagination. When Kyudo was modernized for the general public in the early 20th century, largely through a master named Honda Toshizain, these body principles spread into ordinary Japanese physical education. Generations of Japanese children grew up being told to move from the Tanden, to keep the vertical line, to stay centered. So when they picked up a golf club decades later, that instinct was already wired in. They didn't have to be taught not to sway. Their bodies already refused to. That's the piece the West never had. We came to golf with no tandem, no vertical cross, no 700-year-old habit of moving from a still center, so we sway, and then we pay to be told, over and over, in expensive little pieces, to stop swaying. If that realization landed the way it landed for me, you might want to go deeper, and that's exactly why I put the full picture into a book called Japan Simple. It's a collection of this kind of knowledge. The quiet, practical Japanese principles that got left out of everything they sell us in the West, written plainly so you can actually use it. You'll find it mentioned in the description below. Now, back to the machine itself, because understanding why it profits from your struggle is what finally made me angry enough to go looking for the real answer. I felt another piece click hard. The fat shot isn't a swing flaw, it's a center flaw. But knowing that still left the biggest question of all. How do you actually get your center to stay forward and quiet tonight without 700 years of training? Because that's the part they never wrote down for people like us. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking right about now. This is fine for a man standing on a mountain range in Japan with all the time in the world, but you've got a life. Maybe you play once a week if you're lucky. Maybe your back isn't what it was. Maybe you've got 15 minutes in the garage, not 2 hours at a temple. So this next part is built for you. For your real life, your real house, the stuff you already own, no equipment, no membership, no trip to Japan. Let me walk you through it exactly the way I finally worked it out, standing on my own back patio. Start with your feet, because the center you're trying to control lives right between them. Most amateurs set up with their weight even 50 and 50, or worse, leaning slightly back onto their trail foot, the foot farthest from the target. That lean is the fat shot waiting to happen. So we fix it before you even move. Take your normal stance with a club or even a broom handle, right there in the room you're in. Now settle a little more weight onto your lead foot, the left foot for a right-handed player. I want you to feel about 60% of your weight in that lead foot and 40% in the trail foot at address. Not leaning your head over, just quietly pressing more into the front foot. This alone nudges your low point forward, toward the target, before you've swung an inch. Here's the home test that made it real for me. Get a coin, any coin, set it on the floor, on carpet or a mat, and take your setup so the coin sits an inch or two inside your lead foot, forward of your sternum. That coin is your ball. Now make slow, small swings and try to brush the carpet just after the coin, on the target side of it, not at the coin, after it. Brush, 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 always in front of the coin. What you are training, right there in your living room, is the low point. You are teaching your body that the bottom of the arc lives ahead of the ball, not at it. This is the towel version 2. If you play on grass, lay a small folded towel a few inches behind where the ball would be, and learn to miss the towel entirely on the way down. Your club has to reach the ball before it reaches the ground. Miss the towel, hit the ball first. And here is where the tandem comes into your busy Western life. As you make those little brushing swings, put one hand on that spot 3 fingers below your navel. Feel it. And as you swing down, feel that center press very slightly toward the target, never backward. That is the whole secret in one small motion. Center forward, not center back. The Kyudo master kept the vertical cross from sliding. You are keeping your belly from sliding away from the ball. Do that for 10 minutes tonight. 10 minutes with a coin and your own hand on your belly. Not 2 hours, not $40. You already own everything you need. I did this in my garage for a week before I ever went back to a course. And I want to tell you the truth, the change didn't feel dramatic while I was doing it. It felt almost too small. But that's how the real ones always feel. Because the small move was hiding the real secret. And the real secret is what pulled everything together for me. Let me give it to you now, the whole pattern, the piece I promised you at the start. Here is what I finally understood, and where I found it. I kept coming back to those Kyudo teachings from the Ogasawara tradition, the ones about the vertical cross. And there was one instruction inside that old practice that Western golf never had, because Western golf never had archery in its blood. It wasn't about the feet, or the weight, or even the swing. It was about what you do before you move at all. It was about the breath, and about setting the center down into the ground. In Kyudo, before the archer draws, he does not just stand there, he settles. He breathes down into the Tanden, long and slow. And as he breathes out, he feels his center sink and lock, as if he were being gently pressed into the floor from above. Only when the center is set and still does he begin. The old text described the archer as a mountain immovable at the base, everything alive above it. The Japanese have a phrase for this quality of a grounded, settled lower body. They speak of the koshi, the hips and low back, being seated as if you were about to sit down on a tall stool without one there. Now watch what happens when you carry that one habit to golf. And this is the thing almost no Western amateur ever does. Before you swing, you take one slow breath out, and as you breathe out, you let your knees soften just slightly, and you feel your center, that Tanden, 3 fingers below the navel, sink down and settle over your lead foot. You are seating yourself. You are becoming the mountain at the base. Your weight is already 60% forward, and now your center is quiet, low, and locked toward the target before the club ever moves. From that seated, settled center, a sway backward becomes almost impossible. You cannot hang back if you are already sunk forward and grounded. The low point has nowhere to go but ahead of the ball. The thud disappears. Not because your swing got better, because your center stopped running away. That is the whole pattern. And here is how every clue fits together now. The ordinary Japanese golfer strikes it clean, not because of talent, and not because of the mats, but because he inherited a 700-year-old habit of moving from a still, seated, forward center, the Tanden, the vertical cross, the mountain at the base carried out of the Ogasawara archery tradition, formalized around the year 1300, poured quietly into golf when the game arrived in 1901, and never sold to any of us in the West because we had no such tradition to draw on, only products to buy. And modern sports science backs every bit of it. Researchers who study golf with force plates, those pressure sensors built into the ground, have measured what elite ball strikers actually do. And it turns out the best players shift the great majority of their pressure onto that lead foot by the moment of impact, often around 80% or more, while their upper center stays quiet and behind the ball's original position. Ground first through the feet, center settled forward, head steady. Force plate laboratories at sports universities, including research out of Japan's own institutions, have confirmed the same thing the Ogasawara archers wrote down by hand centuries ago. Get the center forward and grounded, and the strike takes care of itself. The knowledge existed. It was written down and guarded by an archery school for 700 years. It was quietly kept alive in the bodies of ordinary Japanese people through their schooling and their culture. It was poured into their golf without fanfare, so plainly that they couldn't even explain it to me when I asked. The West let it fade, or never had it, and filled the gap with lessons and gadgets and shame, and it took a cold Tuesday night on a range in Setagaya, watching a 75-year-old man flush ball after ball for me to finally pull the thread all the way back to a samurai archery manual and understand what I was looking at. Now you have it too. Let me put it in your hands as 3 simple things you can do this weekend. First, at address, set 60% of your weight into your lead foot and leave it there. Do not rock back. Second, breathe out once, soften the knees, and let your center 3 fingers below the navel sink and settle over that lead foot, like sitting onto a stool that isn't there. Become the mountain at the base. Third, keep that center still and swing so the club brushes the ground after the ball on the target side. Practice it at home with a coin, brushing the carpet in front of the coin 10 minutes a night. That's it. That is the thing 30 years of lessons never gave me. Sitting inside a tradition older than the game itself. Try it this weekend and I promise you'll feel it. The strange, clean, quiet of a ball struck first and turf second. Do that once, on purpose, and you'll never trust the expensive version of golf the same way again. Something was taken from us, or maybe just never handed over. A simple, grounded, human way of standing over the ball that ordinary people in Japan have used for generations without paying a dime for it. You just got it back, and I think you're the kind of person who already suspected the truth was simpler than they told you. The kind who trusts his own eyes on the range over a glossy promise on a shelf. That's why you watch this far. That instinct of yours is right more often than they'd like. So, tell me one thing down in the comments. When you think back on your worst fat shots, were you leaning back onto your trail foot at the top, hanging back the way I was for 30 years? Or did you never once think about where your center was? Be honest. Write it down below. I read them, and I answer. And if you want more of this, the quiet, practical, real Japanese knowledge that got buried under everything they sell us, come join us and subscribe. This isn't about supporting a channel. It's a small group of us digging up the useful things that got taken out of our hands and putting them back where they belong. Next time, I'm going to show you the way old Japanese craftsmen kept their steel tools sharp and rust-free for decades, using one thing already sitting in your kitchen. You'll never look at your garage the same way again. Stay grounded, keep your center forward, and I'll see you in the next one. So there it is, the idea behind that clean ball first strike. But I stopped just short of the drill itself. Inside the quiet wisdom circle, I hand you the full Kamakura setup drill, step by step. And if something isn't clicking, you ask me directly and I answer you myself, a real person, not a machine. You won't be alone in there. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen and you can cancel anytime.